Hey, are you okay? Could this be a really dangerous situation? I was on a helicopter tour with my colleagues when I ran into my ex-girlfriend from middle school. Without me asking, she introduced the older man she was linking arms with beside her. This is my boyfriend. He's a manager at a hotel company. And you probably flunked your high school entrance exams and are just some middle school graduate bum now, right? She said this while laughing, but then, suddenly, the pilot fell ill, and we were in an emergency situation. What the hell is going on? As my ex-girlfriend yelled in panic, I calmly said, "I'll fly the helicopter instead." What? My name is Sean. I'm a captain at an airline. Since I was a kid, I've always loved planes, and I would often ask my dad to take me to the airport. It was one day during a holiday. I was sitting in the airport lobby, looking through my favorite airplane encyclopedia. Suddenly, a voice called out to me from the front. "Do you like airplanes too?" I looked up to see a girl about my age with blonde pigtails. She pointed to my encyclopedia and looked at me with curious eyes. "My name's Ashton. The next flight is about to take off. Want to watch the planes with me?" Before I could answer, Ashton grabbed my hand and pulled me along. Though I was a bit confused by her boldness, I was excited to have found a fellow airplane enthusiast. She told me she often visited the airport to see off her father, who traveled a lot for work. As we watched the plane waiting quietly on the runway for its passengers, Ashton tilted her head in wonder and murmured, "Planes are so huge, but how do they even fly?" I opened my encyclopedia and eagerly shared what I knew. The wings create lift, which pushes against the air, and then the jets thrust the plane forward and up into the sky. I went on explaining, even though she hadn't asked, passionately talking about how planes worked. Ashton listened in awe, and when I finally finished, she asked, "Do you want to build airplanes someday?" "Yeah." I nodded enthusiastically, but Ashton, with a thoughtful look on her face, placed her hand on her chin. Then, noticing a pilot passing by, she lit up and said, I think I like pilots more. They look so cool flying the plane in their uniforms, don't they?" At that time, I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I was just happy to have a friend who shared my love of planes. So I made a carefree promise. "Okay, I'll become a pilot. And when I do, I'll take you on a flight." This encounter, for better or worse, ended up shaping my entire life. When I started elementary school, I saw a girl in my class who hadn't changed a bit, still with her blonde pigtails. "Ashton, is that you? Do you remember me? We met at the airport." I couldn't contain my excitement as I approached her. "Oh, you're the airplane lover from back then. We're in the same school now? What a coincidence. It feels like fate, doesn't it?" We hit it off immediately, and even though we were still just kids, I couldn't help but feel like we were destined to meet. "Do you remember the promise we made back then?" "Of course I do. I said that when you become a pilot, I'd make you my husband." Ashton, mature beyond her years, even made a little engagement promise. From that point on, I seriously began working toward becoming a pilot, studying not just school subjects but also learning about navigation, weather patterns, and geography. To protect my eyesight, which was crucial for becoming a pilot, I even avoided playing video games. I also tried to avoid watching TV as much as possible, except when necessary. As a result, I couldn't keep up with what was popular at school and found it hard to join in on my classmates' conversations, making my school days feel long and tough. However, I remembered the promise I made to Ashton, and as long as I could stay close to her to fulfill that promise, I convinced myself that I didn't need any other friends. So, I kept working hard alone. Seeing my dedication, my parents began to support me as well. They never discouraged my dream. Instead, they bought me books to help me study to become a pilot, and on weekends, my dad would take me go-karting for practice. One day, while traveling with my family on a trip that was both for studying and for leisure, I got separated from my parents in the crowded airport. Still just a child, I panicked and burst into tears. Just then, a man wearing a pilot's cap approached me. "Hey, are you okay? Are you lost from your mom and dad?" "Yeah." "Well, how about we go find them together?" He took me to the Lost and Found Center. An announcement was made throughout the airport, and I sat and waited until my parents arrived. While we waited for my parents, he stayed with me, keeping me company. "Do you like airplanes?" "Yeah." "Well, guess what? I'm a pilot." "Really?" "I want to be a pilot when I grow up." "How did you become one?" "That's great." I had to study really hard to become a pilot. It was tough, but you can do it too. I look forward to seeing you flying planes one day. Wearing a cap just like mine. "Yeah." "I'll do my best." Talking with him gave me the courage I needed, and before I knew it, I wasn't scared anymore. My parents arrived shortly after, and I parted ways with the kind pilot. But his words stuck with me, and from that day on, he became the pilot I looked up to. I'm going to be a cool pilot like that man, I thought. As I entered middle school, my schedule got even busier. Naturally, I started spending less time with Ashton. But since she knew about my dream of becoming a pilot and supported me, I thought she would understand. However, Ashton gradually began expressing her frustrations. "All my friends go on way more dates with their boyfriends. Don't you care about me at all?" I was so overwhelmed with studying that I didn't always have the patience, and I ended up snapping at her some days. "I'm studying hard to keep my promise to you. Can't you see that?" We started arguing more and more, with our conversations always turning combative. After several rounds of this, my relationship with Ashton began to deteriorate. Time passed without us being able to fix things, and then, one day, as I was preparing for my high school entrance exams, something happened. On my way back from the library after a study session, I stumbled upon a scene that left me frozen in place. Ashton was walking arm in arm with an unfamiliar guy, looking pretty cozy. I didn't have the courage to confront her then, so I went home and started overthinking it. Maybe it wasn't anything. Maybe it was just a close relative or something. I convinced myself of that, but the next day, I decided to ask Ashton directly. "Hey, who was that guy you were with yesterday?" "Who cares? We're not married or anything, so it's not like you can control who I spend my time with. I'm free to hang out with whoever I want. Besides, you don't pay any attention to me, so I was just killing time." Ashton said this without a hint of remorse. "But..." I tried to draw a rebuttal from my dry throat, but I realized that I had despised Ashton. So, I couldn't say anything back and just walked away. Right now, I just need to focus on my studies. I tried to convince myself, but her words kept swirling around in my head, and I couldn't concentrate at all. After all, my goal of becoming a pilot was tied to the promise I made to Ashton. If things were like this between us, did becoming a pilot even matter anymore? What was I working so hard for? I began to lose sight of the meaning behind chasing my dream. In the end, I lost focus on my studies and ended up failing to get into my first choice high school. When Ashton heard that I failed my exams, she was furious. "What? My boyfriend is repeating a grade? That's unforgivable. You put up with me all that time saying you were doing it for me, and now this? Don't ever contact me again. An engagement promise from when we were kids? That's not valid. And with that, she broke up with me on the spot. Wait, hold on. I almost managed to explain myself, but watching Ashton walk away so easily made me realize that our relationship was truly over. I went home and curled up in my room alone. What have I been doing all this time? Did all my efforts lead to this mess? My bookshelf was crammed with books on pilot licenses and aerodynamics. I considered throwing it all away, but then my eyes landed on one particularly worn-out airplane encyclopedia. Yes, the very book I had on the day I met Ashton. Looking back, it was that book that brought us together and sparked my dream of becoming a pilot. Suddenly, memories from my life flashed before me. The nights I stayed up late studying, rubbing my tired eyes. My parents, listening with smiles as I talked about my dreams. And that day at the airport when I saw the man who became my role model. I asked myself again, what do I really want to do? And the answer I came to was that I didn't want to give up. At first, it was all for my promise to Ashton, but over time, it had become more than that. I realized that pride, expectations, and admiration were driving me forward. With that, I pulled myself together and continued studying. I had actually secured a spot at a different school, so I moved on to high school without having to repeat a year. Afterward, I earned my commercial pilot license at aviation school, then gained flight hours as an instructor, and finally got hired by a regional airline. Through intense training, I eventually became a co-pilot. Even as a co-pilot, I kept honing my skills alongside the captain, and by the time I was 32, I had been promoted to captain. To celebrate, my friend and colleague, Walter, who joined the airline at the same time as me, offered to take me on a helicopter tour. On the day of the tour, as Walter and I were waiting our turn, I heard a familiar voice from the line next to us. What? You're here too? I turned to look and saw Ashton, arm in arm with a middle-aged man. She had grown into a mature woman, though I could still see traces of her from our middle school days. Without me asking, she began to boast. Oh, this man? He's my boyfriend, Tony. He's a section chief at the hotel chain owned by this airline. And you? I assume you gave up on becoming a pilot? Probably just a middle school graduate now, right? And, seriously, 2 guys here? What? Is this like a date or something? She laughed mockingly, taunting me. Walter, overhearing, looked like he was about to explode. What the hell are you talking about? This guy. But I hurriedly covered his mouth, not wanting to have anything to do with her anymore. And I whispered to him, sorry, you're going to have to play along with me here. Yeah, that's right. You seem to be doing well. Have a nice flight. I responded as calmly as possible and refused to react to anything else she said. Eventually, Ashton and Tony's turn came, but they weren't being called in, and they were getting visibly irritated. Finally, Ashton snapped and started yelling at the staff. Hey! We've been waiting for 30 minutes. What's going on? The staff member, looking troubled, responded. Well, actually, the pilot of the helicopter fell ill a short while ago, and we're currently trying to figure out a solution. Hearing this, Tony joined in, raising his voice. What? We paid a lot of money for this. Get it sorted out now. You can't find another pilot? The staff was cringing and saying, I'm sorry. Walter, who was watching the commotion, quietly whispered in my ear, "Hey, looks like this is your chance. Show them what you've got and teach that awful woman a lesson." Back then, despite being incredibly busy, I had managed to get a helicopter license while working as a flight instructor. So I was perfectly capable of flying one. I really didn't want to get involved with Ashton, but a small part of me wanted to prove something. Reluctantly, I stepped forward and spoke to the staff. "If it's okay, I can fly the helicopter instead." As soon as I spoke, both Ashton and Tony stared at me in stunned silence. I showed my pilot's license to the staff, and they radioed upstairs to ask for further instructions. After waiting a few minutes, the staff came back and said, "Thank you for helping," and escorted me to a room where I changed into the prepared uniform. After a quick briefing, I was set to board the helicopter. As I was preparing, Ashton and Tony were led over, looking confused. When Ashton saw me in uniform, the doubt about me achieving my dream vanished from her eyes. Her expression completely changed, and she stared at me with admiration. Feeling the awkward tension, I couldn't help but throw in a bit of payback. "Are you two on a date? I'll make sure it's a wonderful flight under the night sky. I'll do my very best to make it special for you." Ashton, still in shock, couldn't respond. I ignored it and started giving the tour narration as if talking to myself. "To your right, you can see the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of New York. It was a gift from France in 1886 and stands as a symbol of freedom and democracy in the United States. And to your left, you'll see Manhattan." Though initially surprised, Ashton gradually started listening to my commentary, and by the time the tour ended and we landed, her eyes were practically sparkling with admiration. Tony, seeing this, had a nervous look on his face. He straightened his suit, reached into his pocket, and handed me a tip with a calm demeanor. "Thank you for the wonderful flight. Here's a little something for your trouble. Thank you very much. Please enjoy the rest of your evening," I said, feeling relieved the job was over and ready to escape Ashton's gaze. But then Ashton, glaring at Tony, cut in. "What do you think you're doing?" "I was planning to tip him and ask him out for dinner, so don't get in my way." Before I knew it, she was leaning out of her seat and wrapping her arm around mine. Tony and I both blurted out, "Huh?" at the same time. "Isn't this guy your boyfriend?" Hesitantly, I asked, and without any shame, Ashton boldly replied, "Well, he was. But you're my fiancé, right? Now that we've reunited, the old promise takes priority. I don't really know what you're talking about. You were the one who broke up with me, remember? And you said yourself that our childhood promise meant nothing. Besides, I don't have feelings for you anymore," I coldly stated, trying to get a handle on the bizarre situation. But Ashton refused to give up. "That's a lie. You became a pilot for me, didn't you?" "No, I did it for my own dreams and pride. Though I do appreciate you for giving me the initial push," I added with a smile, not wanting her to misunderstand. Ashton stood there, stunned for a while, before snapping out of it. "Whatever. I'm done with this," she huffed, turning back to Tony. "Hey, what should we eat tonight?" she asked, her voice suddenly sweet. Tony, now glaring at her with cold eyes, replied, "I guess I'm not your boyfriend anymore, right? I had no idea you were this shallow. We're done. Don't ever show your face to me again." With that, he pushed her with such force that Ashton fell on her backside on the spot. "You're so mean," Ashton cried, bursting into tears. Tony, clearly uncomfortable, muttered under his breath, I should be the one crying, and hurried off. The staff came over to check on Ashton, asking, "Are you all right?" That's when she seemed to realize everyone was watching her. Her face flushed bright red as she muttered, "I'm fine," giving a small bow before quickly walking away with her head down. Watching her leave, I let out a wry smile, thinking, I can't believe I ever had feelings for someone like that. I turned to Walter and apologized for how things turned out. "Sorry, man. I ruined your celebration." "Nah, it's fine." "That was pretty entertaining," he said with a laugh. Then, with a mischievous grin, he started teasing me. "I'm just glad you actually had a girlfriend back in the day. I was starting to wonder about you. But man, that ex of yours was something else. That's a part of my past I'd rather forget. Let's never bring it up again." As we were joking around, the staff came running after us. Apparently, the pilot who had been feeling unwell had fully recovered. Hearing that, Walter and I decided to go ahead and take the helicopter tour ourselves. "Thank you so much for today," the pilot said inside the helicopter, apologizing profusely for having to miss the flight and expressing his deep gratitude for me stepping in. Then, out of the blue, the pilot offered me a job. "I heard your flying was flawless. If you're interested, why not come work with us?" At first, I thought he was joking, so I laughed and replied, "Oh no, it wasn't that great." But from the look in his eyes, I could tell he was serious. So I put on a serious face as well and politely declined. I've wanted to be an airplane captain since I was a kid, so I still want to keep flying planes. The pilot looked a bit disappointed but smiled and said, "I hope we get to work together someday." A few days later, I was reprimanded for flying another company's helicopter without permission from my own employer. However, since it was an emergency and I had the support of the pilot and staff from that day, I didn't face any penalties. Now, my flying skills are in high demand, and my schedule is packed with flights. I've been so busy that I hardly get time to go home, and I'm still living a lonely bachelor's life with no girlfriend in sight. But I genuinely feel grateful to Ashton for inspiring this dream, and to my parents, who supported me, as well as the pilot I met at the airport. Without them, I wouldn't be where I am today. Because of these people, I'm able to feel fulfilled in my work every day. Now, I head to the skies once again, hoping that one day I can become someone's inspiration too.